All right, so today we're taking a deep dive into something pretty interesting. Montenegro and their gambling scene.
Yeah, it's a country a lot of people haven't even heard of.
Yeah, smaller than China's Hainan province, but they're really trying to make a name for themselves in the European gaming market.
Definitely, and projections show they could be bringing in over $20 million by 2025.
So what is it about this small coastal nation that's drawing in these gaming companies?
Well, they've got some savvy strategies, and I think that's what's attracting attention from companies all over the world.
Okay, so obviously the World Heritage Site of Kotor Bay is gorgeous.
Beautiful, but the scenery isn't what's bringing in the big bucks.
Right, so what is it? What makes Montenegro so attractive to these companies?
The business environment.
Ah, okay, so like what?
Well, for one, the licensing process is really streamlined. Like, it often only takes 2 to 3 months.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and the licenses are recognized internationally.
Okay, so that's huge, but what about the tax structure?
Very attractive.
Okay, that's what everyone always says, but what does that actually mean, like, for a company setting up shop there?
Imagine keeping almost 90% of your gross gaming revenue.
Wow, that's incredible.
That's the reality in Montenegro.
So no huge chunks go into taxes?
Nope, they've got a system of fixed monthly fees or a GGR tax with no VAT.
So compared to other European nations, that's got to be a big draw.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge advantage.
So it seems like they're really trying to encourage companies to set up there, but is there any limits to what kind of gaming a company can offer?
Well, that's another thing that makes Montenegro so unique. One license covers both land-based and online gambling.
So you don't have to get separate licenses for each?
Exactly. It's all under one roof.
Wow, so much simpler than a lot of other places I know.
Oh, yeah. It's a major difference compared to a lot of other countries.
So it sounds pretty appealing so far, but I'm sure it's not just a free-for-all. There have to be some requirements.
Oh, of course, they definitely have a process to make sure everything's above board.
So what does a company actually need to do to get a license?
They've got to prove they're a legitimate, a well-structured business.
Okay, makes sense.
So you've got to provide a ton of documentation.
Like what?
Everything: company registration, business plan details about the games you'll offer, even background checks on key personnel.
They really do their due diligence.
Yeah, it's rigorous. And something else you should know, you need a land-based license before you can apply for an online one.
So they want operators to have some sort of physical presence in Montenegro.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. It adds another layer of accountability. But what about the cost of entry? I mean, we've talked about the low taxes and everything, but are there any upfront costs or capital requirements?
Yeah, for sure. There are capital requirements you have to meet.
So, like, how much are we talking? Is this only for the big players, or can smaller companies get in on the action too?
Well, for casinos, it's 300,000 euro.
Okay, and online?
500,000 euro for online gambling.
Okay.
But lottery games are way lower, only 75,000 euro.
Wow. So they are trying to create a space for different sized operators. That's interesting.
Yeah, it seems like they're going for a diverse gaming landscape.
I remember reading something about proposed amendments to Montenegro's gambling laws back in 2021.
Oh yeah, those amendments are still pending.
Okay, so what would they change?
They're really focusing on responsible gambling and aligning more with European standards.
So, like, what kind of specific changes?
Well, stricter player identification requirements, for one.
So making sure everything's legal and above board?
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance between a thriving gaming sector and responsible gaming.
Yeah, it seems like they're really trying to do it right.
They are, but it hasn't always been smooth sailing. Remember that proposed ban on electronic payment methods in 2024?
Oh yeah, that caused quite a stir.
Yeah, over 25,000 people signed a petition against it.
I read that they were worried it would hurt online businesses and increase the risk of money laundering.
Right, and it really shows the difficulties of regulating this digital landscape.
Trying to keep up with technology and foresee all the consequences of new regulations is tough.
For sure, and I think this whole situation shows that Montenegro is dedicated to its gaming sector, but finding that right balance, it's not always easy.
No, it's definitely a learning curve for everyone involved.
That's for sure.
Okay, so we've talked about what Montenegro offers these companies, the low taxes, the streamlined licensing, and the requirements. But what's the process actually like for a company that decides, hey, we want in on this? How do they get a license?
Well, it's kind of like a multi-step verification process.
Okay.
First you got to gather all the necessary documents, company registration, your business plan, all the specifics about the games. They'll offer background checks on everyone, proof of capital, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, you really want to show them you're the real deal.
Yeah, exactly. Total transparency.
So once you have everything together, then what?
Then you submit it all to the Games of Chance Administration.
Oh, okay, that's the regulatory body.
Yep, the AGC for short.
So they get your application, and what happens then? Is it a long wait?
Well, the AGC goes over everything with a fine-tooth comb. They look at your financials, your business model, all your compliance procedures, everything.
Wow, they don't mess around.
Nope. It's thorough, so it can take a couple of months.
That's not too bad, actually, especially when you compare it to other jurisdictions.
Yeah, it's pretty quick, all things considered, and sometimes they even do a site visit to your physical location.
Oh, wow, so they really are hands-on.
They want to make sure everything matches up with what you said on paper.
So I guess if everything checks out, you get your license and you're ready to launch.
You got it.
So we talked about capital requirements to get started, but what about about ongoing costs?
Well, once you're up and running, it's actually really simple for online gaming, at least.
Oh.
Yeah, you pay a fixed monthly fee of 10,000 euros.
Wait, really? That's it?
Yep, no percentage of revenue, no crazy calculations, just one flat fee.
Wow, that's a pretty sweet deal. No matter how much you're making, you're paying the same amount.
Exactly. It definitely sets them apart from other countries.
So are land-based casinos the same?
It's a little different for them. They pay 10% of their gross gaming revenue,
Okay.
plus a fixed annual license fee of 50,000 euro.
So there's a difference between online and brick and mortar. Makes sense.
Yeah, they each have their own kind of rhythm, you know?
Right, and I'm assuming betting shops and lotteries have their own fees too.
Exactly. Every type of gaming is a little bit different.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, the licensing process, the fees, Montenegro's appeal, but where does all this lead? What does the future hold for Montenegro's gaming industry?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, they're a small country with big ambitions. Clearly, they want to be a major player in this market.
Yeah, they're definitely aiming high.
And it seems like they're doing a lot of things, right? The low taxes, the streamlined licensing, the international recognition.
It's a good combination, for sure. Plus, they've got a great location right in the heart of Europe.
Yeah, you can't beat that. But like we talked about earlier, there have been some bumps in the road.
Yeah, that whole electronic payment thing definitely highlighted some of the challenges they face.
It's tough to stay ahead of the curve, with the digital landscape constantly changing.
Exactly. It's a balancing act trying to keep up with technology and make sure the regulations are effective without stifling growth.
Yeah, for sure. So do you think Montenegro can overcome these challenges?
Well, I think they're definitely committed to making this work, and they're not afraid to adapt and learn from their mistakes.
That's good because this industry moves fast. You have to be able to pivot.
Exactly. So, yeah, I think they have a real shot at becoming a major player, but only time will tell.
It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Oh, yeah, this is a story that's just getting started.
Well, we've talked a lot about the government side of things, but I'm curious about the companies themselves. What should they be thinking about if they're considering setting up shop in Montenegro?
Well, obviously, they have to do their due diligence, look at the regulations, the cost, all that stuff, but they also need to really think about their target audience.
Right, like does Montenegro even make sense for the types of games they're offering?
Exactly, and they also need to consider the infrastructure and technical support in Montenegro.
Oh, right. Make sure they can actually operate there smoothly.
Yeah, is the digital infrastructure strong enough, and can they find the skilled workers they need? These are all important questions.
So it's not just about jumping on the bandwagon. There's a lot of strategic planning involved.
Oh, absolutely. You got to do your homework and make sure Montenegro aligns with your overall business goals.
What about the competition? How crowded is the market in Montenegro?
Well, it's definitely heating up. More and more companies are realizing the potential here, so there are both domestic and international operators vying for market share.
So a company would need to figure out how to stand out from the crowd.
Right. They need to understand the competitive landscape and find their niche.
So yeah, a deep dive into the market is crucial before making any big decisions.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. The more a company knows, the better prepared they'll be.
So it sounds like Montenegro's gaming scene is pretty dynamic, lots of opportunities, but also some potential pitfalls to watch out for.
Yeah, it's definitely a fascinating landscape full of potential, but it's still evolving,
Yeah, for sure.
It's a story that's still being written.
It's really interesting to see a country like Montenegro make such a bold move on the international stage. It's inspiring.
It is, and I think it shows that even in a world dominated by global giants, smaller nations can still carve out a space for themselves.
Especially when they're willing to adapt and embrace new technologies.
Exactly. It's a testament to their vision and agility.
It's really cool to see a country like Montenegro, kind of stepping onto the world stage like this.
Yeah, going for it.
Yeah, it is. So for our listeners who've been with us on this deep dive, what's the one thing they should remember about Montenegro and this whole gaming industry thing?
I think the big takeaway is that Montenegro might be small, but they've got this big vision, for where they fit in the global gaming market.
Yeah.
They've created this really business-friendly environment, and it's attracting a lot of attention, but they're not naive to the challenges either.
Yeah, they're definitely dealing with a lot and trying to balance economic growth and, responsible gaming.
Right, and keeping up with all the changes in technology, that's a challenge in itself.
For sure. But it seems like they're handling it all pretty well. I mean, they're being realistic, but also ambitious.
Yeah, exactly. They're not shying away from the tough stuff.
No, they're facing it head on.
And that's what makes this whole story so interesting to watch.
So for anyone listening out there who's involved in gaming, operators, developers, investors, what's the final thought we should leave them with about Montenegro?
I'd say keep your eye on Montenegro. This is the country to watch. They're just getting started, and who knows what's next.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that sometimes the most exciting things are happening in the places you'd least expect.
Exactly. You never know where the next big thing is going to come from.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Montenegro's gaming scene. We'll see you next time.